We've taken our sides off of the form. We did let the form cool down, and then we heated the form back up for a couple minutes, let that cool down again to kind of set the sides. Now, when we take them off the form about a half hour to an hour after that, the sides are still a little bit damp. So what we do is we put it into this outer form here. Okay, so this outer form, we've pulled these pieces out. That's just a wedge. Okay, this outer form allows us to keep its shape for these sides. Now, unfortunately, the sides that I had bent had some pretty serious flaws in them, and they wound up snapping on me. Not snapping, but we get little cracks in it, and they go vertically. Usually that's just a flaw in the wood. We did run across that from the same stock. We ran across another problem, the same problem with another one. So I wound up redoing these. So I made a shallow body here with some stock that I had laying around. So this is our form, and everything looks nice on it. We're kind of checking it out. You can see there's still a little bit of dampness in here, but that's fine. And basically, we're just inspecting it to make sure there's no vertical cracks in it. And a lot of times you'll get the vertical cracks in here or anywhere there's a flaw in the wood. The sides will live in this form until you're ready to mount the neck. So that's for quite a long time, actually. So you really only get one form per uke as you make it. So here's what we have to do now, is we have to actually cut the sides down the length. In order to do that, I have a side cutting jig here. Now, I don't know what other luthiers do. This is a method that I've come up with that seems to work best for me. So what I'll do is I'll put this together like this, get all the stuff in there nice and tight, put my braces in like so, wedge it out, flip it over. Now I have to make a mark here on this side and a mark on this side. This is basically my center point here, making the marks on my center points. So once I have that done, I can pull this out. So I will do one at a time. I'll take my square. Now I'm going to take that line that I made, the mark on the edge here. I'm going to put it on my square, and I'm going to draw a line straight across from that square. Nice, visible line. And do that on both sides. Now this line is what I'm going to use to actually make sure that I get nice tight seams. I don't really care too much about the seam at the top. Again, this is the seam at the top. This is the seam at the bottom. This one is key. So this one actually, I'll do it is I'll check it from both sides. I know that it's horizontal from that side, but this one's got to be right on from this side, and it is. So that's good. That means these two sides are perfectly parallel, which is not always the case, but you sand that down later after the fact. Now, that's where this comes in. So I take this and I put my piece right in the center, and I will line it up on the seams. Now, I designed this this jig here, and again, my buddy Tommy had helped me put it together as an actual thing. So then I take my flush trim, and I'm just cutting it always forward first. Always forward first. So make your mark. If you don't do forward first, you could wind up breaking out the grain. So now I've got my piece here, just slightly protruding, as we take some 60 grit sandpaper and a sanding block. Doesn't really matter what that sanding block is. Might just find a piece of wood, any old piece of wood. I had one that I liked to use. looks like I lost it. I just grab any piece of wood. So grab anything with a straight edge on it. And then this design of this has got, so there's a little lip here, which catches right on here like this. And you just, not too hard because you don't want to split the wood. You can split the edges very easily. Now, this is actually a bit tedious, and I know a lot of guys would actually not do it this way. They would just cut it close, glue them together, and then put a line, then put a seam, route out a piece of that on the block, and then just fill it in with an inlet. I like the way this. I personally like the way that that it looks when you do this. So the way you get the nice tight seams together says something about quality. So then I pull that off, and I have a nice square end cut to right where I need it. And then everything is checked on square, so you make sure that that's right where you want it. It is within very, very faint lines of a gap. So it looks like it's in pretty good shape because this will squeeze together pretty well. So that's in pretty good shape. So now I'm going to do it to the other four sides. So now we've got their two forms, our two sides and the form. What we're going to be doing, I've already located the, I've got some blocks here. Now I use this, it's like an 8-ply plywood here. I know a lot of traditionalists will say, plywood is not a natural material, so I should use, blocks of wood. But I found that sometimes the blocks of wood, when you get down to half an inch or so, they're not quite as strong as I want them to be. And the crappy plywood you get at Home Depot is not very good. So I actually found this 8-ply plywood, which is high-quality plywood that runs relatively inexpensively, but I wound up finding it at Michael's. So I used that instead of solid blocks. Get a straighter form, a straighter block, and much more strength to it. So now I've got my forms, my sides, all bent down and trimmed off. So we're going to put them into the form, like so. Leave the form open. Put each one into the sides, putting the ends on the side like that, so they seam up together. Hold this tight, and now we've got our forms, our sides in the form. Okay, so in order to do this, we block this here, and we block this here. But as you can see, I'll show you this, in here, we've got a gap. I don't know if you can see that too easily. See if I can get that. See the gap? Okay, probably easier to see the gap on the other side. Okay, so see the gap between the wood and the sides, the block and the sides, and that's obviously not going to work. So you have two options. Option number one is to curve the block. Make the block match that curve. So your sides are perfectly smooth. I don't like that for a couple of reasons. When you have the curved side and these are cut perfectly, you're going to wind up with a small gap in between. Number two is most of my ukes, if not all of them, actually have the ability to stand up on their own. So if I flatten the bottom out using a nice flat block, when you put it together, the uke actually will stand up on its own. Now this is a shallow body, so it's going to be a little top heavy and probably won't do the case, but I like to have flat sides. I also like to have a flat top. It makes jointing the top and the back, and the neck to the back, much simpler and much more straightforward. It gives it a nice boxy sound as well, so you get a little bit of different sound out of it, but that's almost unnoticeable. So in order to do that, I shim it. So I get what I call my bonding box. And inside here, I've got a bunch of old business cards, which are glossy. Okay, and the key is glossy, because if you don't use glossy, then you're going to wind up gluing to the sides, and it's just messy. So in order to bond these correctly, the first thing you have to do is glue them, obviously. Let me grab a paper towel. So, I will make marks where these guys need to be glued. Okay. This is just giving me a guide of where the glue is going to have to go. I'm sorry you can't see that, but basically I'm just making some lines in there. Okay, so I'm going to put my glue back. I don't need my glue quite yet. So in order to do this, I need to shim out so these make a straight edge here, okay? And in order to figure that out, the first thing I'm going to do is pop this here, loosen it up a little bit, and I start off with, these are just thin strips of maple that I've got and some other scraps of thinner woods that I have. So in order to check that, I'll put a nice clean business card here, shiny side out. That would stick to the thing, and you wind up to the sides. You wind up sanding it all off, and it's just a nightmare. So slip that in there, and then I see how close I am. Okay, there's still a significant gap here. So you need to pull that tight. Then you look at that. Okay, there's still a slight gap here. Pulling it with the clamps would straighten that out, but not quite enough. So I'll take a half-cut card, a half-folded card, slip that in between. Make sure I get it all the way down there. Pull it tight. And we're closer. So maybe another card. Slip that back there. And it's just basically every piece is slightly different, depending on how they're cut and that kind of thing. So that's a nice tight fit there. So I could be happy with that one. I know my spacings here. I'll do the same thing to the other side. Start with a piece of wood and a card. Pop this open. I slip it behind here. And see what we have. Okay, this is not even close. So it looks like this one I might need a thinner piece of wood to slip back here. And if that doesn't do the trick, a couple cards. Close. So maybe a half fold card will do the trick. Do I have another half fold card in here? No. I use the cards. Here's a half fold. I use the cards in multiple different ways throughout the process. So after the cards lose a little bit of their rigidity, they get, let's call it, promoted to another process, where they get torn in half and dealt with. Now that's a nice tight seam. So that's beautiful. So I've got my measurements out, so I know what pieces I need to use. So take this, pop that out. Take this, pop that out, lay that right there. Put my bonding box aside. Now, these are my pieces. So I need to get my glue. And I need to glue up one side. Just a little bit of glue on the edges here. This glue is this glue bottle. I'm using Type Bond 1. Type Bond 1 is a commonly used glue for luthiers. It's not quite 100% traditional. Traditional wood glues would have been a hide glue. Hide glues are a pain, is my opinion, because they have very little work time, as well as very little You have to heat them up, and it's a big process just to get them to work. So this is, I prefer the tight bond over anything else. I do hear good things about fish glue, however, so I've been contemplating trying out some fish glue, which I understand is also compatible with hide glue. So if you have something already made with hide glue, then you could utilize fish glue because the glues don't typically mix. So you can see now I've got a nice little bead there, and all I need to do now is add some glue to my piece, add some glue always spread the glue. The number one rule in woodworking with glue is, and every woodworker will tell you this, spread the glue. If you don't spread the glue, guess what's going to happen? You're gonna miss bond. And if you miss bond, especially with a uke, you may not know that your bond is no good until you start to try to play it and you hear some vibrations. So, you know, my general rule is, if you use too much glue, you can clean off the glue. If you don't use enough glue, well, you're going to be reaching in with all sorts of strange little tools to try to get some crazy glue to do an after-built bond. And that's, you know, can't say I've never done that, but so now glue. I have a little piece of dirt there. That's lined up to my seam. I've already marked the center points of my blocks. I would show you how I did that and what tool I used to mark the center points perfectly and easily, but don't have a patent for my tool yet, and if I showed you, I'd have to kill you. So, being a Christian, I don't want to have to kill you. So I'll hold off on that part for now. Now I'm just gluing it in. I'm just pulling it tight. That gets a nice tight seam on there. You get some glue run out there. Squeeze out is always a good thing, but I try to clean it up. Squeeze out means you got enough glue in there. So, I always prefer to see some squeeze out, even if I have to come in here and clean it up later. I'd rather see some squeeze out. There's not a lot of squeeze out on this side, but I think we're still okay. There's enough. If I give it another squeeze, I get a little bit of bead, and that's good. Then we just do the same thing to the other side. Put this like this. Using, the term is copious amount of glue, right? And I always run my glue first before spreading, because once you spread the glue, it starts to set up and soak in. So I always put my glue, lay my glue out first, cap it, store it upside down, and then you could just kind of brush it over, spread out your glue. Every once in a while, I will glue the side of the block that I did not mark. Yeah, just reminds me that I'm human when that happens. So my wife sometimes tells me I'm not human, I'm a robot, but glue that in there, make sure that's nice and pushed down. Do I have a nice, everything's, just make sure that's lined up. I'll have to sand that down later to get it just right. Of course that flipped over on me. that in there and clamp it on. That's light, nice, got a lot of squeeze out. And that is that. I'll remove my squeeze out. Yes, if you're wondering, these are garbage chisels. This is a Harbor Freight piece of junk chisel. Absolutely worthless. Holds an edge for about 3 seconds. I spend 40 minutes getting this a nice sharp edge on my chisels, on this chisel, and absolutely disappeared in 3 or 4 strokes. So I just use them for cleaning up. That's what you get for $6. You want a real chisel? Get a real chisel. Okay, thanks very much. And that's basically how you bond the edges.